Eldberg's Dar Heimur Hugans. I'm trying the best I can to pronounce that without being disrespectful. This is the second album by Eldberg, released in 2018, and it's an intentionally retro prog album. And one of the ways that a progressive rock band can identify themselves as being retro prog is the kinds of sounds they use, particularly in the keyboards. What I see in progressive rock music is three major sounds that are kind of that exemplify that retro sound. There's the mellotron, there's the Moog synthesizer, and there's the Hammond organ. Eldberg really leans, I think, mostly on this latter instrument. As a matter of fact, I think you could say that Eldberg does for the Hammond organ what Anecdote does for the mellotron. In fact, the use of a Hammond organ here is so pervasive, it kind of makes me think a little bit of like Tony Kaye, pre-1970, yes. Although that stuff was pretty positive and uplifting, in general, it used a lot of Hammond organ. That was an instrument that Tony Kaye was really attached to, and you hear that a lot here. But also Eldberg, I think, takes a little bit more darker route. A guitar player really has a sense that he is a fan of Steve Hackett and Camel and the sort of darker side of progressive rock music. And another thing that's important as we look at these Icelandic albums is what language they choose to sing in. For example, Hjaltalín from before were singing intentionally in English. But here, Eldberg is singing intentionally in Icelandic. And apparently, there's a progressive rock scene in the early 70s in Iceland. And although it never got quite as robust as things like Italian progressive rock or other general European progressive rock, it had its own identity. And they all sang in Icelandic. And so one of the ways that Eldberg is trying to show their own Icelandic-ness is through their intentional use of the Icelandic language. And it's interesting to listen to this too as a non-Icelandic speaker because the sound of Icelandic lyrics has a sort of ominous feel to it, mainly because maybe it's hidden behind this veil of secrecy. You don't really know what they're saying. But this guttural language has this feeling of kind of almost being ominous, especially on this album. There's a couple of spoken word sections on it that really give it a dark feel.